The upscale restaurant buzzed with nervous whispers from the staff. She's here again. Nobody wants to serve her table. The doors opened and Victoria Hale entered, her cold eyes scanning the room as she spoke with cutting authority. I hate being kept waiting. Everyone scattered, pretending to be busy with other tasks. In the corner sat a man in a simple button-down shirt, a single father waiting patiently at his reserved table. When she approached his area, her voice heavy with disdain. Nobody here is worthy of sitting at the same table as me. He looked up, his gaze calm and steady. I don't think that's true. The entire restaurant fell silent. David Miller was 38 years old, a single father who worked maintenance jobs to support his 9-year-old daughter Emma, while navigating the careful balance between earning enough for their modest apartment and being present for homework help, school events, and the countless small moments that define childhood. His days were structured around Emma's needs and his work schedule at the commercial building complex, where he served as head of maintenance, leaving little time for the kind of social activities that most adults took for granted. Each morning began at 5:30 a.m., when David would rise before Emma to prepare her lunch and lay out her clothes for school. The small 2-bedroom apartment in the east side of Boston wasn't fancy, but David had worked hard to make it a warm, stable home. Photos of Emma's mother, Sarah, smiled from carefully positioned frames, maintaining her presence in their lives 4 years after cancer had taken her. Emma had her mother's eyes and curious spirit, a daily reminder of what David had lost and what he still had to protect. The dinner meeting had been arranged by Marcus Brighton, an old friend from college, who had gone on to build a successful corporate consulting business, while David had chosen a more practical path, working with his hands and building a reputation for solving problems that others couldn't fix. Marcus insisted that David needed to expand his professional network beyond the construction and maintenance crews where he normally found employment. This could open doors for better opportunities, Marcus had explained over coffee last week, pressing David to consider meeting potential business contacts who might value his practical skills and work ethic. David had reluctantly agreed to the dinner meeting at Leonardum, understanding that Marcus was trying to help, but feeling uncomfortable about the expensive restaurant and formal business atmosphere that seemed designed for people with very different backgrounds and financial circumstances than his own. He'd arrived 15 minutes early as always, wearing his best shirt and hoping that his obvious discomfort in elegant settings wouldn't undermine whatever professional opportunity Marcus thought this meeting might create. The restaurant staff had been buzzing with nervous energy since he'd been seated, their whispered conversations suggesting that someone particularly difficult was expected to join the dinner service. David caught fragments of their discussions about a demanding customer who was notorious for treating service workers poorly and creating uncomfortable situations that made everyone dread her arrival. Having worked customer-facing jobs in his youth, David felt immediate sympathy for the staff's anxiety. When Victoria Hale entered the restaurant, the change in atmosphere was immediate and palpable. Servers who had been moving efficiently between tables suddenly found urgent tasks in storage areas, while the hostess approached Victoria with obvious reluctance and carefully neutral facial expressions that suggested years of experience managing difficult customers. Victoria was clearly accustomed to the effect her presence had on restaurant staff, moving through the dining room with the kind of imperial confidence that expected absolute deference from anyone whose job involved providing service to paying customers. Her expensive clothing and perfectly controlled appearance marked her as someone who was used to having her preferences accommodated without question or delay. At 42, Victoria had built her technology empire from the ground up, transforming an innovative security software concept into a multi-billion-dollar company that now occupied a sleek glass tower in downtown Boston. Every detail of her appearance was calculated, from the precisely tailored charcoal suit to the single strand of pearls that represented understated wealth rather than flashy ostentation. "Where is my dinner companion?" Victoria asked the hostess, her tone carrying irritation that someone had failed to meet her exacting standards for punctuality and availability. The hostess, a woman who had weathered decades of difficult customers with professional grace, seemed momentarily flustered as she consulted her reservation system. "Ms. Hale, there seems to be some confusion with the reservations this evening. We have you scheduled to meet with a Mr. Reynolds at 7:30, but he hasn't arrived yet. However, we do have a gentleman waiting for a business meeting as well, Perhaps there's been a scheduling misunderstanding? Victoria's expression tightened with displeasure at the suggestion of administrative inefficiency. Reynolds? I don't know any Reynolds. I'm supposed to be meeting with potential investment partners arranged by Horizon Consulting. Check again. David had been observing the interaction from his corner table, noting how the restaurant staff seemed to shrink under Victoria's scrutiny and how her obvious wealth and authority were being used to intimidate people whose livelihoods depended on maintaining professional courtesy even when customers treated them poorly. When Victoria's cold gaze swept across the dining room and landed on his table, David maintained eye contact rather than looking away as the other diners had done. The hostess, now visibly anxious, approached David's table with Victoria following closely behind. Mr. Miller, I apologize for the interruption. There seems to be some confusion with our reservation system this evening. Ms. Hale is also waiting for a business associate, and we're trying to sort out if perhaps your parties were meant to meet together. Before David could respond, Victoria made her dismissive comment about the worthiness of potential dinner companions, her gaze taking in David's simple attire and making immediate assumptions about his social and financial status. Her words carried the weight of someone accustomed to judging others based on superficial indicators of wealth and influence, dismissing those who didn't meet her exacting standards. David's response came from values his late wife had instilled in their family and his own understanding that treating people with basic human respect was more important than accommodating someone's sense of superiority, regardless of their financial status or social position. I don't think that's true, David said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm authority that came from years of managing work crews and dealing with his own challenges as a single parent. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, including the people who work here. The response seemed to surprise Victoria, who was clearly accustomed to either obsequious agreement from people hoping to benefit from her wealth or careful avoidance from those who couldn't afford to risk offending someone with her influence and resources. David's willingness to challenge her behavior in a public setting created exactly the kind of uncomfortable situation that most people worked hard to avoid when dealing with wealthy and powerful individuals whose displeasure could have professional or financial consequences. Victoria sat down across from David with the kind of controlled precision that suggested someone who was accustomed to having every interaction proceed according to her preferences and expectations. But her obvious surprise at his directness indicated that his response had disrupted whatever script she normally followed during business dinners with people seeking her approval or investment. "Do you know who I am?" Victoria asked, her voice carrying the kind of cold authority that had probably intimidated countless business associates and service workers into submission over the years she had built her corporate empire. David's response demonstrated his understanding that Victoria's wealth and influence were undeniable facts, but also his conviction that financial success didn't justify treating other people poorly simply because they were in subordinate positions. "I know who you are," he replied evenly. "Victoria Hale, CEO of Secure Tech Solutions. But I also know that nobody deserves to be treated badly just because they're here to serve you." The comment created a ripple of reaction throughout the restaurant staff who were within hearing distance. Their obvious surprise at witnessing someone challenge Victoria's behavior directly suggested that such confrontations were extremely rare in her social and professional circles. Rather than the explosive anger that the staff seemed to expect, Victoria's response was thoughtful silence as she studied David's face with the kind of intense scrutiny that suggested she was trying to understand motivations that didn't fit her usual experience of human nature and business relationships. "You're not who I was supposed to meet tonight," Victoria finally said, her tone slightly less cold than before. "Who exactly are you, and why are you at this particular restaurant on this particular evening?" "David Miller. I'm waiting for my friend Marcus Brighton from Horizon Consulting. He arranged for me to meet some business contacts who might be interested in my skills as a maintenance and systems specialist." David maintained steady eye contact as he spoke, neither intimidated nor deliberately confrontational. "I'm guessing you are also connected to Horizon somehow?" A flicker of recognition crossed Victoria's face. "Marcus Brighton. Yes, his firm handles some consulting work for my company. He mentioned having someone I should meet regarding building management systems, but that meeting was supposed to be at the Capitol Grill, not here." At that moment, David's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Glancing at the screen, he saw a text from Marcus. David, huge mix-up with reservations. James Reynolds can't make it tonight anyway. Victoria Hale was supposed to be at Capitol Grill, not Leonardum. Sorry for confusion. Call tomorrow to reschedule. David showed the message to Victoria, whose expression tightened with irritation. Typical. Administrative incompetence wastes more of my time. I should fire Horizon for this level of disorganization. A young waiter approached their table, visibly nervous about interrupting, but clearly assigned the unwanted task of serving Victoria's table. Excuse me, Ms. Hale, Mr. Miller. Would you like to order drinks while you decide about dinner? Victoria turned her cold gaze to the waiter, who couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, probably working to pay for college. Before she could speak, David intervened with deliberate courtesy. I'd like water for now, thank you. And I think we need a few minutes to sort out a scheduling confusion. The waiter nodded gratefully and looked hesitantly at Victoria, who seemed momentarily thrown off by David's intervention. Fine. Sparkling water. San Pellegrino, not whatever generic brand you usually serve. After the waiter departed, David addressed Victoria directly. He's just doing his job. Being harsh with him doesn't improve your water or your evening. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You seem remarkably comfortable lecturing a complete stranger about her behavior, Mr. Miller. Most people would consider that presumptuous. Most people would consider speaking to service workers that way disrespectful, David countered. My late wife was a waitress when we met. I've seen how people like you affected her day, her self-worth, her dignity. Something in David's mention of his late wife seemed to register with Victoria, a momentary softening that was quickly masked by her practiced corporate composure. People like me, you've made rather sweeping assumptions about someone you've just met. Fair enough, David acknowledged. Same as you did when you decided nobody here was worthy of sitting at your table, including me. Their conversation continued with Victoria testing David's resolve through increasingly pointed comments about social hierarchies, business success, and the realistic expectations that people should have about their place in economic systems that rewarded wealth and punished financial limitations. David's responses remained calm and principled, drawing on his experience as a single parent who had learned to prioritize his daughter's well-being over his own comfort, and his understanding that character was measured by how people treated others when they had the power to choose kindness or cruelty. Money doesn't make someone a better person, David said when Victoria suggested that her financial achievements gave her the right to expect special treatment from everyone around her. It just gives them more opportunities to show who they really are. The observation seemed to affect Victoria more deeply than David had expected, her carefully maintained composure showing cracks that suggested his words had touched on something vulnerable beneath her powerful exterior. For a moment, genuine curiosity replaced the cold dismissiveness in her eyes. And what opportunities has lack of money given you, Mr. Miller? The question contained less sarcasm than might have been expected, suggesting a spark of genuine interest. David considered his response carefully. The opportunity to discover what actually matters. When my wife got sick, we lost everything except what was essential. Our savings, our home, our plans. But I learned that as long as I had Emma, my daughter, I still had everything that truly mattered. Victoria took a sip of her sparkling water, her eyes never leaving David's face. How old is your daughter? 9, smart as a whip, loves art and science equally, can't decide if she wants to be an astronaut or a painter when she grows up. The genuine affection in David's voice was unmistakable, his face softening as he spoke about Emma. And you support her on a maintenance worker's salary? The question could have been condescending, but something in Victoria's tone suggested actual curiosity rather than judgment. Head of Building Systems Maintenance, David corrected mildly, for the Riverside Commercial Complex. Good benefits, flexible enough to be there when Emma needs me. We don't have everything, but we have enough. Victoria's perfectly manicured fingertips tapped thoughtfully against her water glass. Riverside, that's one of my company's properties. The coincidence seemed to intrigue her. You work for me, in a manner of speaking. David raised an eyebrow. I work for Riverside Management Group, which is a subsidiary of Hale Investments, which is my holding company. Victoria studied him with renewed interest. How long have you been there? 6 years, started right after Sarah, my wife, got her diagnosis. Needed the health insurance. David didn't elaborate on the painful memories of watching his wife deteriorate while simultaneously working full-time and caring for a 5-year-old. Their conversation paused as the waiter returned to take their dinner orders. David, recognizing that he was now apparently having dinner with the billionaire owner of his workplace, rather than Marcus's business contact, selected one of the more modestly priced items on the menu. Victoria ordered with precise specifications that demonstrated familiarity with fine dining, but her tone with the waiter had noticeably moderated. As their dinner progressed, Victoria gradually revealed information about her background and the experiences that had shaped her approach to business and personal relationships, including betrayals by family members and business partners that had taught her to trust no one and to use power as protection against future disappointments. My first company was a startup I founded with my college boyfriend and 2 classmates, Victoria explained, her voice carrying controlled emotion that suggested she rarely shared these details. We developed a revolutionary encryption algorithm together. The night before our first major pitch to investors, my boyfriend copied all our code, transferred company funds to a private account, and disappeared. He resurfaced 6 months later as the CTO of a competitor with suspicious similarities to our technology. David listened with genuine attention, rather than the strategic calculation that Victoria was probably accustomed to receiving from people who wanted something from her. His responses demonstrated empathy for her experiences, while also maintaining his position that past hurts didn't justify treating innocent people poorly. That's a terrible betrayal, David acknowledged. Trust is precious exactly because it can be broken so easily. Victoria's precisely applied lipstick formed a tight line. Trust is a luxury I can't afford. In my position, everyone wants something. They see the money, the company, the power, never the person. I understand why you might feel like you need to protect yourself, David said, as Victoria described the business betrayals that had cost her millions of dollars and personal relationships that had ended when she discovered people were only interested in her money. But punishing everyone around you for other people's mistakes isn't protection. It's just isolation. The comment landed with visible impact, Victoria's eyes showing emotions that she normally kept hidden behind professional composure and financial authority that had become both her shield and her prison over the years she had built her business empire. As their dinner concluded, Victoria studied David with an expression that suggested she was making calculations about something beyond their unexpected encounter. "You're an unusual man, Mr. Miller. Most people either grovel for my approval or resent my success. You don't seem interested in doing either." David shrugged slightly. "I found that treating people as people works better than treating them as positions or bank accounts. Even billionaires need someone to talk to them straight occasionally." When the check arrived, Victoria efficiently handed her credit card to the waiter without consulting David, a practiced movement that brooked no argument. Secure Tech is hosting a charity gala next Saturday at the Harrington Hotel, a scholarship fund for disadvantaged students pursuing technical education. You should attend. The invitation was delivered as a statement rather than a question, the kind of directive Victoria was clearly accustomed to having followed without question. David hesitated. "I appreciate the invitation, but I don't have a tuxedo hanging in my closet, and I'd need to find childcare for Emma." Victoria seemed momentarily thrown by his response. It was evident that she was unaccustomed to practical obstacles that couldn't be immediately overcome with money or influence. "The company can provide appropriate attire. As for your daughter, bring her. There will be other children present." David's surprise must have been evident because Victoria continued with unusual awkwardness for someone typically so composed. "The event supports education. It would be appropriate for a child to attend and see the importance of philanthropy firsthand." David recognized the invitation as significant, coming from someone who clearly maintained careful boundaries around her professional and personal life. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "Thank you. We'd be honored to attend." As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Victoria extended her hand for a formal handshake. "It was an unexpected pleasure meeting you, David Miller. I'll have my assistant send details about the gala." David accepted the handshake, noting that despite her polished appearance and evident wealth, Victoria's grip was firm and unpretentious. Likewise, Ms. Hale. Victoria, she corrected, the slight softening in her expression, suggesting that the evening had affected her in ways neither of them had anticipated. As Victoria's sleek black limousine pulled away from the restaurant, David stood for a moment on the sidewalk, trying to process the strange turn his evening had taken. What had begun as a straightforward business meeting arranged by Marcus had somehow transformed into an unexpected encounter with one of Boston's most powerful and notoriously difficult business figures, who happened to own the building where he worked and who had now invited him and Emma out to a high society charity function. The drive home to their modest apartment took David through neighborhoods that transformed gradually from the gleaming wealth of downtown Boston to the more practical, lived-in areas where working families made their homes. Each mile represented a social and economic boundary that people like Victoria Hale rarely crossed, while David navigated these transitions daily. When he arrived home, the babysitter, Mrs. Patel from the apartment downstairs, reported that Emma had finished her homework and fallen asleep while waiting up for him. David found his daughter curled up on the couch, a drawing pad still clutched in her small hands. He carefully lifted her, noting how she grew a little heavier each year, and carried her to her bedroom with its glow-in-the-dark stars stuck carefully to the ceiling. After tucking Emma in and paying Mrs. Patel, David sat at the small kitchen table, still wearing his good shirt from the unusual dinner meeting. The contrast between Victoria Hale's world and his own couldn't have been more stark, yet something about their interaction had felt strangely genuine despite their different circumstances. He wondered what Sarah would have made of the evening and could almost hear her practical voice advising him to be careful around people whose casual decisions could affect his livelihood. The next morning, as David prepared Emma's breakfast before school, he considered how to explain the unexpected invitation to the charity gala. Emma sat at their small kitchen table, already dressed in her school uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that David had learned to make nearly as neatly as Sarah once had. "Dad, you're thinking really loud," Emma observed, her perceptiveness sometimes startling for a 9-year-old. "Did your business meeting not go good yesterday?" David smiled, setting a bowl of oatmeal with sliced bananas, Emma's favorite, in front of her. "Actually, it was interesting. The person I was supposed to meet didn't show up, but I ended up having dinner with a woman named Victoria Hale. She owns the company that owns the building where I work." Emma's eyes widened. "Is she your boss's boss's boss?" "Something like that," David acknowledged, amused by Emma's grasp of corporate hierarchy. "And she's invited us to a fancy party on Saturday night, a charity event that raises money to help kids go to school." "Us? Me too?" Emma's excitement was immediate, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "Is it like Cinderella at the ball? Do I need a princess dress?" David chuckled, grateful for his daughter's uncomplicated enthusiasm. "Not exactly a princess dress, but you could wear your special occasion dress from Aunt Judy, the blue one with the silver sparkles." As Emma chattered excitedly about the unexpected adventure, David's phone chimed with an email notification. The sender was Rebecca Chen, executive assistant to Victoria Hale, CEO, and the subject line read simply, "Gala details confidential." The formality of the communication reminded David of the significant social gap between his world and Victoria's, making him question the wisdom of accepting the invitation. After dropping Emma at school, David arrived at the Riverside commercial complex for his regular shift. The building was a 15-story glass and steel structure, housing various businesses from law firms to tech startups. As head of maintenance, David supervised a team of 5 technicians responsible for everything from HVAC systems to security infrastructure. His morning routine typically included reviewing overnight maintenance logs, assigning daily tasks to his team, and addressing any urgent repair requests from tenants. Today, however, his thoughts kept returning to the previous evening's unexpected dinner and Victoria Hale's surprising invitation. "Earth to Miller," came a familiar voice, breaking into his distraction. Mike Guzman, David's assistant supervisor and closest friend on the maintenance team, was watching him with amused concern. "You've been staring at that work order for 5 minutes without moving. Something wrong with the Johnson account?" David shook his head, refocusing on the paperwork in front of him. "Sorry, just distracted. Had an unusual evening." Mike raised an eyebrow, leaning against the doorframe of the small maintenance office. At 52, Mike had 20 years of building systems experience and had become both mentor and friend to David when he had first started at Riverside. Unusual how? Did Brighton set you up with some corporate a bigwig who wants to poach you for twice the salary? Because if so, remember who taught you everything you know about commercial HVAC. David laughed, appreciating Mike's ability to lighten his mood. Nothing like that. Actually, I ended up having dinner with Victoria Hale. Mike's casual posture stiffened immediately. Victoria Hale? As in, owns this building? Eats small companies for breakfast, Victoria Hale? How the hell did that happen? As David explained the mix-up with reservations and the unexpected dinner conversation, Mike's expression shifted from shock to concern. David, be careful there. People like that don't suddenly become friends with maintenance managers. There's always an angle. It wasn't like that, David insisted, though a part of him acknowledged the wisdom in Mike's caution. She was difficult at first, but there was something genuine there, underneath all the corporate armor. Mike shook his head skeptically. I've been in this business a long time. The ultra-rich might play at being regular folks occasionally, but they don't cross class lines without a reason. Just watch yourself. The morning passed with routine maintenance tasks, but at lunch, David finally opened the email from Victoria's assistant. The message was detailed and efficient, explaining that a car would pick up David and Emma at their apartment at 6 p.m. Saturday, and that a representative from a formal wear shop would contact David to arrange measurements for appropriate attire. The email concluded with a note that all expenses were covered by SecureTech as part of the company's commitment to the charity event. The thoroughness of the arrangements made David uncomfortable. On one hand, it was a generous gesture that solved the practical problems he'd mentioned. On the other hand, it emphasized the power imbalance between them and created a sense of obligation that made him uneasy. He'd always made his own way in life, and accepting such extensive assistance felt dangerously close to dependency. Back in her downtown office, Victoria Hale sat at her expansive desk overlooking Boston Harbor, reviewing quarterly projections while her thoughts periodically drifted to the unexpected dinner encounter. David Miller was unlike anyone in her usual social or business circles, straightforward, principled, and seemingly unimpressed by her wealth and position. His comments about using power as an opportunity to reveal one's true character had resonated more deeply than she cared to admit. The Henderson acquisition documents are ready for your review, Rebecca announced, entering Victoria's office with practiced efficiency. At 30, Rebecca had served as Victoria's executive assistant for 5 years, longer than any of her predecessors. Her ability to anticipate Victoria's needs and manage her demanding schedule with unflappable competence had made her invaluable. Victoria nodded absently, still distracted by thoughts of the previous evening. Did you send the gala details to David Miller? Yes, and I've arranged for Emmett's formal wear to contact him about attire. The car service is confirmed for Saturday. Rebecca paused, studying her boss with careful attention. May I ask about Mr. Miller's connection to the company? I couldn't find him in our executive database. Victoria rarely felt the need to explain her decisions to anyone, but Rebecca's discretion had been proven over years of loyal service. He's the maintenance supervisor at Riverside. We met through a scheduling error last night, and I found his perspective refreshing. Rebecca's expression revealed nothing, though this was certainly unusual. Victoria never socialized with employees below senior management level. I see. Will there be anything else regarding Mr. Miller and his daughter? Victoria considered for a moment. Find out more about him. Employment history, education, family circumstances. Nothing invasive, just a standard background profile. After Rebecca departed, Victoria turned her chair toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the distant ships in Boston Harbor. David Miller's words about isolation echoed in her mind. For years, she had constructed careful barriers between herself and others, using wealth and power as protective shields against the kind of betrayals that had marked her early career. The result was a life of extraordinary success by conventional metrics, but lacking the kind of genuine human connection that David seemed to share with his daughter. The charity gala had been a spontaneous invitation, unusual for someone who typically calculated every social interaction for maximum strategic advantage. Victoria wasn't entirely sure why she had extended the invitation to someone so outside her usual circle, but something about David's straightforward integrity had piqued her interest in a way that the polished executives and wealthy socialites in her regular orbit never did. As the week progressed, David found himself increasingly uncertain about attending the gala. The representative from Emmett's Formal Wear had visited their apartment, bringing an array of sample tuxedos and taking measurements with professional efficiency. Emma had been delighted by the attention and the opportunity to wear her special occasion dress to a real fancy party, but David couldn't shake a sense of discomfort about entering Victoria's world, even temporarily. On Friday afternoon, as David was completing inspection reports in his office, Mike appeared in the doorway with an unusually serious expression. "David, you need to see this, now." Mike placed his tablet on the desk, displaying a business news article with the headline, "Secure Tech Solutions Considers Maintenance Outsourcing for Commercial Properties." The article detailed plans to replace in-house maintenance staff with third-party contractors across all Secure Tech-owned commercial buildings, including Riverside complex, potentially affecting dozens of jobs. "This was published an hour ago," Mike said quietly. "Corporate hasn't made any official announcement to us yet, but if it's true," David felt a cold knot form in his stomach as he scanned the article. If Secure Tech outsourced maintenance operations, his entire team could be unemployed within months. The timing of Victoria's sudden interest in him now seemed suspicious in light of this development. Was the gala invitation simply a way to manage potential pushback from affected employees? Or worse, had his unexpected dinner with Victoria somehow accelerated plans that might cost his friends and colleagues their livelihoods? As David drove home that evening, his mind raced with conflicting thoughts. He had promised Emma the exciting night out she'd been anticipating all week, but his instinct for self-preservation warned against walking into a situation where he might be used as a prop in corporate maneuvering. His phone contained both Rebecca's detailed instructions for tomorrow evening and the unsettling news article that cast those plans in a troubling new light. Pulling into the parking space outside their apartment building, David made a decision. He would attend the gala as planned, but with clear eyes about the potential motives behind the invitation. If Victoria Hale thought she could use a superficial gesture of inclusion to soften the blow of eliminating his team's jobs, she would discover that the same straightforward honesty she had found refreshing at dinner could become considerably less comfortable when directed at her business practices. Inside their apartment, Emma greeted him with excited chatter about the upcoming gala, her innocent enthusiasm a sharp contrast to the complicated adult concerns weighing on his mind. As he helped her practice properly using the formal silverware arrangement Mrs. Patel had taught her, just in case they have fancy forks, Dad, David resolved to protect his daughter from his professional concerns while using the opportunity to advocate for his team if necessary. What had begun as an accidental dinner meeting had evolved into something more complex, a collision of different worlds with potentially significant consequences for David's future. Tomorrow evening would determine whether Victoria Hale was genuinely interested in crossing the social boundaries she had mentioned, or if David was simply being managed as a minor complication in larger corporate strategies that treated people as disposable resources rather than human beings with families, dignity, and value beyond their immediate utility. Saturday evening arrived with a crisp autumn chill settling over Boston. David stood before the bathroom mirror, adjusting the bow tie of his rented tuxedo with unfamiliar fingers. The man staring back at him looked like a stranger, polished, formal, and completely out of his element. 6 years of maintaining building systems had given him dexterity with complex mechanical equipment, but the simple act of properly knotting formal neckwear presented an unexpected challenge. "Dad, the fancy car is here!" Emma's excited voice called from the living room, where she had been stationed at the window for the past 15 minutes. The black town car that Victoria's assistant had arranged was indeed waiting at the curb outside their modest apartment building, its sleek presence drawing curious glances from neighbors. David gave up on perfecting the bow tie and went to join his daughter. Emma twirled in her special occasion dress, the blue fabric with silver accents catching the light as she moved. Her dark hair had been carefully arranged in an elaborate braid that Mrs. Patel from downstairs had helped with, insisting that a proper formal event required proper formal hair. The 9-year-old's eyes shone with excitement, her innocent anticipation unmarred by the adult concerns that had been troubling David since discovering the news about potential outsourcing. You look beautiful, Em, David said, momentarily setting aside his worries as he took in his daughter's happiness. Just like a princess. Emma grinned, then adopted a serious expression as she scrutinized her father. Your tie is crooked, Dad. With surprising confidence, she reached up and straightened it with small, careful fingers. Mom taught me how from pictures before she got sick. Remember when she helped you get ready for Cousin Jeremy's wedding? The unexpected memory of Sarah hit David with its usual bittersweet punch. She'd be so proud of you right now, he managed, swallowing the emotion that threatened to surface. This wasn't the time for grief. Tonight was for Emma's adventure. The driver, a professional man in his 50s, treated Emma with formal courtesy that delighted her, opening the car door with a slight bow that made her giggle. As they settled into the leather seats, David noticed a small cooler containing juice boxes, specifically the apple variety that Emma preferred. The attention to detail suggested Victoria's assistant had been thorough in her research about them, a realization that was both impressive and slightly unsettling. As the car navigated through Boston's evening traffic, Emma's face pressed against the window, watching as their familiar neighborhood gave way to progressively more upscale areas. David used the opportunity to review what he knew about the charity gala. According to the event details Rebecca had sent, the evening supported the Technical Education Access Foundation, providing scholarships for underprivileged students pursuing vocational and technical careers. It was exactly the kind of practical education that had given David his start, which made the potential corporate decision to outsource jobs like his all the more ironic. The Harrington Hotel stood as a testament to Boston's Gilded Age prosperity, its limestone facade illuminated by strategic lighting that emphasized its architectural grandeur. A line of luxury vehicles deposited guests at the entrance, where staff in formal attire directed them through massive doors into the glittering interior. Emma's eyes widened at the scene, her hand instinctively reaching for David's as the sheer scale of wealth on display became apparent. Remember, David said quietly as their car approached the drop-off point, just be yourself. These people might have more money, but that doesn't make them better or more important. Emma nodded solemnly. Mom always said it's how you treat people that matters, not what you wear or what you have. Exactly right. David squeezed her hand, drawing strength from Sarah's wisdom, living on through their daughter. The driver opened their door and they stepped out into a world that seemed designed to emphasize their outsider status. Women in designer gowns adorned with jewelry worth more than David's annual salary glided past, accompanied by men in tuxedos who wore their formal attire with the ease of frequent use. Conversations around them referenced vacation homes, private schools, and business deals involving sums that could have paid off David's modest mortgage several times over. Emma, however, seemed unintimidated, her natural curiosity overriding any sense of social hierarchy. As they followed the crowd into the hotel's grand ballroom, she took in the crystal chandeliers, elaborate floral arrangements, and string quartet with equal enthusiasm, asking questions that sometimes carried just a bit too far in the hushed atmosphere. Dad, she whispered with 9-year-old volume that wasn't really a whisper at all, that lady's necklace has real diamonds bigger than my marble collection. The woman in question, elderly, dignified, and dripping with family heirlooms, turned with what could have been disapproval, but softened at Emma's genuine wonder. David was searching for Victoria amid the crowded room when Rebecca Chen materialized beside them with professional efficiency. In person, Victoria's assistant was younger than David had expected, probably early 30s, with an air of calm competence that explained how she managed to work effectively with someone as demanding as Victoria Hale. Mr. Miller, Miss Miller, she greeted them with a warm smile that seemed genuine rather than practiced. I'm Rebecca Chen, Ms. Hale's assistant. She asked me to look after you until she's finished with some board members who cornered her near the entrance. May I show you to your table and get you something to drink? As Rebecca led them through the crowd, David noticed the subtle glances their presence attracted. His rented tuxedo, while well-made, clearly lacked the bespoke quality that distinguished the attire of other male guests. And Emma's department store special occasion dress, though pretty, was noticeably simpler than the designer children's wear adorning the few other kids in attendance. Their table, positioned surprisingly close to the front of the room, was already occupied by 3 couples, whose conversation halted abruptly as Rebecca introduced David and Emma. The awkward silence that followed was broken when Emma, spotting the elaborate centerpiece, exclaimed, "Look, Dad, those flowers are just like the ones in the book Mom used to read us about the secret garden." One of the women, perhaps 45, with a softness in her eyes that contrasted with her formal demeanor, smiled genuinely. "You have an excellent eye, young lady. They're English roses, specifically Graham Thomas varieties. Do you like gardens?" Emma launched into an enthusiastic description of the small container garden they maintained on their apartment balcony, completely unaware of the social gulf she was bridging with her natural conversation. The woman, who introduced herself as Margaret Reynolds, wife of a venture capitalist, engaged with Emma's chatter with what appeared to be genuine interest, creating a small island of authentic interaction in the sea of practiced social performance around them. David was answering polite but slightly condescending questions about what exactly maintenance supervision entails from one of the men at the table when a subtle shift in the room's energy announced Victoria's approach. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, acknowledging greetings with efficient charm while maintaining a clear trajectory toward their table. Victoria Hale in her element was even more impressive than she had been at the restaurant. Her gown, a deep midnight blue that appeared almost black until she moved and caught the light, was elegantly simple in a way that screamed exclusive designer workmanship. A single strand of sapphires at her throat provided the only adornment, their deep blue matching her eyes with such precision that David wondered if they had been custom selected for exactly that purpose. "David?" She greeted him with surprising warmth, extending her hand. "I'm pleased you could make it." Her gaze shifted to Emma, and something in her expression softened momentarily. "And you must be Emma. Your father has told me about your interest in both science and art." Emma, momentarily awed into unusual shyness, found her voice. "Thank you for inviting us, Miss Hale. Your party is very fancy." A hint of genuine amusement touched Victoria's lips. "Yes, rather unnecessarily so, but it encourages people to donate more generously." She turned to the table at large. "I see you've met some of our board members and supporters." The subtle shift in the other guest's demeanor at Victoria's clear indication that David and Emma were her personal invitees rather than random charity cases was almost comical. Suddenly, the venture capitalist who had been questioning David about maintenance supervision with barely concealed condescension was interested in his thoughts on building efficiency systems and sustainable operation models. As the formal dinner service began, Emma's careful practice with Mrs. Patel proved useful as she navigated the multiple courses and place settings with adorable concentration. David noted with appreciation that Victoria occasionally guided Emma with subtle gestures when a particularly obscure piece of silverware presented itself, but did so without drawing attention or embarrassing her. The conversation flowed more easily than David had anticipated, largely because Victoria skillfully directed topics toward areas where David's practical expertise gave him solid footing, even among people with multiple advanced degrees and generations of wealth. When the discussion turned to sustainable building practices, David found himself explaining the real-world applications and limitations of theoretical models that the academics and investors at the table had only encountered in presentations. "The problem with most building efficiency consultants," David explained, warming to a topic he knew intimately, "is that they design systems in isolation without considering how they interact in actual daily operation. You can have the most advanced HVAC system in the world, but if it's fighting with your automated lighting and occupancy-based temperature controls, you are wasting energy and reducing equipment lifespan." Victoria watched him with evident interest as he used the water glasses and salt cellars to demonstrate how different systems could be integrated more effectively. "This is exactly why hands-on expertise is invaluable," she commented, directing her remark to the venture capitalist. "All the business theory in the world can't replace someone who understands how things actually work." Emma, who had been quietly observing the adults while carefully eating her dessert, suddenly spoke up. "That's what Dad always says. He says the people who really keep things running aren't usually the ones in the fancy offices." A moment of awkward silence followed as the implications of Emma's innocent comment registered across the table. Victoria, however, laughed with what appeared to be genuine amusement. "Your father is absolutely right, Emma, and smart companies recognize that." As dinner concluded and the formal program began, David found himself surprisingly engaged in the Foundation's presentation about technical education opportunities for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The statistics about declining skilled trades workers and the growing gap between academic credentials and practical workplace needs reflected his own observations from years in the field. During a break in this program, as guests circulated before the fundraising auction, Victoria guided David and Emma toward a quieter corner where a small collection of students benefiting from the Foundation's scholarships were displaying their technical projects. Emma was immediately drawn to a young woman demonstrating a robot she had built that could sort recyclable materials using optical sensors. "This is precisely why I support this particular foundation," Victoria commented as they watched Emma pepper the student with questions about programming and mechanical design. Traditional academic paths aren't right for everyone, and we're facing critical shortages in skilled technical workers because we've devalued practical education. David studied her with newfound interest. "That's not the perspective I'd expect from someone in your position." Victoria's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Because wealthy executives typically favor elite universities and MBA programs? Perhaps, but I built my first company from skills I taught myself in a garage, not from my business degree. The degree opened doors, but the practical knowledge made me successful." Before David could respond, they were interrupted by a tall, immaculately dressed man whose superficial smile didn't reach his calculating eyes. "Victoria, there you are. The Westridge Group is looking for you. Something about their pledge amount." His gaze shifted to David with barely concealed assessment and dismissal. "I don't believe we've met." "James Peterson, my CFO," Victoria said with professional courtesy that lacked the warmth she had shown earlier. "James, this is David Miller, head of building systems maintenance at Riverside." James's handshake was perfunctory, his attention already shifting back to Victoria. "Maintenance? How interesting. Victoria, when you have a moment, we should discuss the operational restructuring proposal. The preliminary numbers are very promising." The phrase operational restructuring sent a chill through David, immediately connecting to the outsourcing news he had discovered yesterday. Victoria's expression revealed nothing as she nodded professionally. "We'll discuss it Monday, James. Tonight is about the foundation." As James departed with obvious reluctance, David caught the calculated glance he directed back toward them, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed their interaction. The moment crystallized David's earlier concerns. Was he simply here as part of some corporate strategy? "Your CFO seems very focused on business, even at a charity event," David observed carefully. Victoria's response was measured. "James is extremely effective at what he does. Maximizing efficiency and profitability is literally his job." She paused, studying David's expression. "But you're concerned about something specific." David hesitated, weighing professional caution against directness. Before he could decide, Emma returned from the student exhibition, bubbling with excitement about the recycling robot and completely transforming the tenor of the conversation. Victoria engaged with Emma's enthusiasm, asking perceptive questions that demonstrated genuine interest in the child's thoughts, rather than adult condescension. The remainder of the evening proceeded with a complex undercurrent that David couldn't quite decipher. Victoria introduced them to various business leaders and philanthropists, consistently presenting David as someone whose practical expertise she valued, rather than as a curiosity or charity case. Yet he couldn't shake the discomfort from James Peterson's comment about operational restructuring, nor the calculating looks the CFO continued to direct toward them throughout the evening. As the event began winding down, Emma's energy finally flagged, her excitement giving way to the natural fatigue of a 9-year-old up well past her bedtime. Victoria, noticing her stifled yawns, smoothly arranged for their car to be brought around early without making Emma feel like she was being treated as a child. "I'd like to show Emma something before you leave," Victoria said, leading them toward a quiet corridor off the main ballroom. The hall featured a series of photographs documenting the foundation's work, including several of students working in technical settings. "These are previous scholarship recipients," she explained to Emma. "Many of them now have successful careers in fields they were told weren't meant for people from their backgrounds." Emma studied the photos with genuine interest, particularly one showing a young woman operating complex HVAC equipment. "She's doing Dad's job." Actually, she designed that system, Victoria corrected gently. She came from a neighborhood where most people didn't finish high school, but she had a talent for understanding how things work. The foundation helped her get training, and now she creates environmental control systems for hospital operating rooms. David watched this interaction with growing confusion. The Victoria Hale showing such thoughtfulness toward his daughter seemed fundamentally different from the cold business executive who might be planning to eliminate his team's jobs, or the demanding customer who had initially treated restaurant staff with such dismissive arrogance. As they waited for their car, Victoria addressed Emma directly. Would you like to visit SecureTech's engineering lab sometime? We have some projects involving art and science together that might interest you. Emma's tired eyes widened with renewed excitement. Really? Could I see the robots? We do have several robotics projects, Victoria confirmed with a hint of a genuine smile. Perhaps next Thursday afternoon? I believe that's an early dismissal day for your school. David was surprised both by the invitation and by Victoria's knowledge of Emma's school schedule. Clearly, Rebecca's research had been thorough. That's very generous, he said carefully, still unsure of Victoria's motivations. It's entirely selfish, Victoria responded with unexpected candor. Your daughter asked better questions about our technology than most of my executive team. When their car arrived, Emma thanked Victoria with the natural grace of a child unburdened by adult complexities. As David moved to follow his daughter into the vehicle, Victoria touched his arm lightly. David, about what James mentioned, operational restructuring. It's not what you might be thinking. We should discuss it, but not here. Perhaps lunch next week. The ambiguity of her statement did little to resolve David's concerns, but he nodded agreement, unwilling to create a scene that might affect Emma's overwhelmingly positive experience of the evening. Thank you for including us tonight, he said simply. Emma will remember this for a long time. Victoria's expression softened fractionally. Your daughter is remarkable. She's being raised with the right values. The compliment, delivered without artifice, seemed to surprise Victoria herself, as though she hadn't intended to reveal so genuine an opinion. As their car pulled away from the Harrington's glittering facade, Emma leaned against David's shoulder, recounting her favorite moments of the evening with fading energy. Ms. Hale isn't as scary as she looks at first, she concluded with 9-year-old directness. She looks at people like she's trying to solve a puzzle, but when she talked to me about the robots, she was nice. People are complicated, David replied, thinking of the contradictions he'd observed in Victoria throughout the evening. Sometimes they show different sides of themselves in different situations. Like your toolbox has different tools for different jobs? Emma suggested, her eyes drifting closed as the excitement of the evening finally succumbed to exhaustion. Something like that, David agreed, gently stroking his daughter's hair as she fell asleep against him. The metaphor was surprisingly apt. Victoria Hale seemed to have different aspects of her personality that she deployed strategically in various contexts. The question that troubled him as they drove home through Boston's quiet streets was which version was authentic, and which was being used to manage him for some corporate purpose he didn't yet understand. Monday morning brought a return to normal routines, with Emma heading to school and David arriving at Riverside Complex for his regular 7:00 a.m. systems check. The weekend's glamorous charity gala seemed almost dreamlike, in contrast to the practical reality of inspecting cooling towers and reviewing maintenance logs. Yet the underlying concern about the outsourcing rumors remained very real, creating a tense atmosphere among his team. So, how was your fancy night out with the boss lady? Mike asked when they met in the maintenance office, his tone balancing between genuine curiosity and cautious concern. Learn anything useful about the outsourcing rumors? David sighed, organizing work orders for the day. It was educational. Emma had a great time. As for the outsourcing, Victoria mentioned something about operational restructuring not being what I think, but we didn't discuss details. Mike's eyebrows rose. First name basis with the CEO? That's either really good or really dangerous. Tell me about it, David agreed, handing Mike the assignments for their HVAC technicians. She invited Emma to tour the company labs on Thursday and suggested we have lunch to discuss the restructuring. Careful, David, Mike warned, his experienced eyes reflecting genuine concern. I've seen this before. Companies soften the blow of major cuts by making a show of caring about the people they're about to let go, Makes for better PR than just sending out mass termination notices. Before David could respond, his work phone buzzed with a priority alert from the 12th floor, the executive offices for Westridge Financial, one of Riverside's most demanding tenants. The alert specified a climate control failure affecting their server room, the kind of high-priority situation that required immediate attention. "We'll continue this conversation later," David told Mike, grabbing his toolkit. "I need to handle Westridge before their servers overheat and they start threatening to break their lease again." The elevator ride to the 12th floor gave David a few moments to compartmentalize his personal concerns. Whatever might be happening with Victoria Hale and SecureTech's corporate plans, his immediate responsibility was to the building and its systems. The server room problem would require his full attention. Westridge Financial's reception area projected the wealth management firm's desired image of traditional stability combined with modern efficiency. Dark wood paneling and leather seating contrasted with glass walls and digital displays tracking market movements in real time. The receptionist recognized David immediately. "Thank goodness you're here," she said with evident relief. "Mr. Keller is about to have a meltdown about the server room temperature. It's climbed 8 degrees in the last hour." David nodded, already mentally reviewing the possible causes. "I'll head back there now. Can you let their IT know I'm coming?" The server room was a carefully controlled environment where even small temperature variations could potentially damage millions of dollars worth of equipment. As David entered, the increased heat was immediately noticeable, despite still being within technical safety parameters. Westridge's IT director, a perpetually anxious man named Alan Pierce, hovered near the main console. "Miller, the monitoring system says we're approaching critical temperature thresholds. What's happening?" The panic in Pierce's voice was barely controlled. David set down his tools and moved directly to the environmental control panel, checking readings and system status indicators. "When did you first notice the temperature increase?" "About an hour ago. It started gradually, then accelerated. We've powered down non-essential systems to reduce heat generation, but if this keeps climbing, we'll have to initiate emergency shutdown procedures." David nodded, already seeing the likely culprit in the diagnostic readings. "You've got a partial failure in the secondary cooling unit. The primary is trying to compensate but can't handle the full load." He accessed the system controls, making adjustments to optimize the functioning unit's performance. "This will stabilize things temporarily while I repair the secondary unit." Over the next 40 minutes, David methodically diagnosed and resolved the issue, a failed compressor relay that had created a cascade effect through the cooling system. The work required both technical knowledge and physical dexterity as he navigated the cramped space behind the server racks while making precision adjustments to delicate components. As the temperature began steadily decreasing back toward optimal ranges, Pierce's anxiety visibly reduced. "You've saved us from a potential disaster, Miller. A full shutdown would have cost us millions in interrupted transactions." David closed the access panel and began gathering his tools. "Just doing my job. I'll order a replacement relay with better heat tolerance. The OEM component isn't really designed for the load you're putting on it with your new server configuration." Pierce looked surprised. "You identified that from just looking at our setup?" "It's a common issue with this model when used in high-density server environments," David explained. "The heat pattern in the failure points to it. I've seen it in 3 other installations this year." As David was completing his maintenance report in the hallway outside the server room, a familiar voice caught him by surprise. "Impressive work in there." Victoria Hale stood a few feet away, her corporate attire and confident posture a stark contrast to the more relaxed demeanor she had displayed at the gala. Today she was clearly the CEO, dressed in a precisely tailored charcoal suit that projected authority without flamboyance. "Wasigas." "Hale," David acknowledged, momentarily thrown by her unexpected presence. "I didn't realize you were visiting Riverside today." "Quarterly property review," she replied with professional neutrality. "I was meeting with Westridge about their lease renewal when the server room situation developed. Your response time was excellent." David finished his report before responding, a small assertion of professional focus that Victoria seemed to note with approval. High-priority alerts get immediate attention, especially for critical systems like server cooling. Victoria studied him with that calculating gaze Emma had described as trying to solve a puzzle. Pierce mentioned that you identified a design limitation that their own IT team had missed. David shrugged slightly. Experience. You see enough failures, you start recognizing patterns. Precisely why hands-on expertise is invaluable, Victoria observed, echoing her comment from the gala. Are you free for lunch today? There are matters we should discuss. The direct transition to business reminded David of their fundamentally different positions. She was ultimately his employer, regardless of the pseudo-social context of their previous interactions. Yes, my schedule is clear from noon to 1. Good. Rebecca will send a car for you at 11:45. With that, Victoria turned and walked toward the executive conference room, leaving David with a distinct impression that he had just received a command rather than an invitation. As promised, a sleek black car arrived at precisely 11:45, whisking David from Riverside service entrance to Secure Tech's downtown headquarters in less than 15 minutes. The contrast between his morning spent fixing mechanical systems in a cramped server room and the rarefied atmosphere of Victoria's corporate domain was jarring. SecureTech occupied the upper 15 floors of a gleaming glass tower that dominated its section of the Boston skyline. The lobby featured the company's security technology subtly integrated into an aesthetic of transparent modern luxury, with soft-spoken security personnel whose professional demeanor couldn't quite hide their specialized training. Rebecca met David at the executive elevator, her efficient greeting carrying a hint of genuine warmth. Mr. Miller, thank you for joining Ms. Hale. She's waiting in her private dining room. The elevator ascended directly to the 35th floor, opening onto a reception area that offered spectacular views of Boston Harbor through floor-to-ceiling windows. Rebecca led David through to a small but elegantly appointed dining room where Victoria was reviewing documents at a table already set for lunch. David, she greeted him, setting aside her tablet. Thank you for making time. Please sit. As David took a seat, he noted that Victoria had arranged for them to be alone. No assistants, no other executives, not even service staff visible in the room. A carefully arranged lunch was already present under silver covers. I assume you have questions about what James mentioned at the gala, Victoria began, direct as always. About operational restructuring. David appreciated the lack of pretense. I saw the news about potential outsourcing of maintenance operations. My team is understandably concerned. Victoria's expression revealed nothing as she removed the cover from her salad. The article was premature and incomplete. The board is considering several options for building operations management, but no decisions have been finalized. With respect, David replied, leaving his own lunch momentarily untouched. That sounds like standard corporate language before layoffs. My team deserves better than management platitudes. Something like respect flickered in Victoria's eyes at his directness. Fair enough. The full proposal includes 3 options: complete outsourcing to third-party vendors, creating a separate subsidiary specializing in building maintenance that would service our properties and potentially others, or restructuring the existing teams with enhanced training and technology integration. I'm advocating for the third option, but James and several board members favor outsourcing for its immediate cost benefits. The frankness of her response surprised David. Why are you telling me this? These kinds of decisions are usually made behind closed doors, with employees finding out only after everything's decided. Victoria set down her fork, studying him with that now familiar analytical gaze. Because your team at Riverside has the highest efficiency ratings and lowest maintenance costs across our entire property portfolio. You've created systems and procedures that I believe should be standardized throughout our operations. She paused, seemingly considering her next words carefully. And because I've observed you solve problems that expensive consultants fail to address with a fraction of their resources. David processed this information cautiously. So you're, what? Researching our team as a model? Using the gala invitation to observe the maintenance supervisor in a social setting? Initially, perhaps, Victoria acknowledged with surprising candor. Our dinner encounter was genuinely coincidental, but it presented an opportunity to understand your approach directly. What I didn't anticipate was Emma. The mention of his daughter immediately heightened David's attention. What about Emma? Victoria's expression softened marginally. Children reveal truths about their parents. how they're raised, what values they're taught. Your daughter is thoughtful, curious, and remarkably unintimidated by situations that would make most adults uncomfortable. She treats everyone with the same genuine respect, regardless of their position or status. She met his gaze directly. That doesn't happen by accident. David felt a complex mix of parental pride and continued wariness about Victoria's motivations. Emma's character is her own achievement. I just try to provide a stable example. A modest answer, but revealing, Victoria observed. Most people in your position would have used Saturday night to network aggressively, leveraging the opportunity for personal advancement. Instead, you focused on making the experience positive for Emma while maintaining your authentic perspective, even when it might have been easier to simply agree with the wealthy donors at your table. David wasn't entirely comfortable with being studied like a specimen. I'm still not clear on why you're sharing confidential corporate planning with me. Victoria's response was direct. Because I want your input on the restructuring proposal before it's finalized. The maintenance teams are vital to our property's function and value, yet the decision makers have limited understanding of what you actually do. Your practical perspective would be valuable. The request was unexpected enough that David took a moment to consider its implications. You're asking me to help design a system that could potentially eliminate my own team's jobs? I'm asking you to help create a model that would preserve the most effective elements of your operation while addressing the board's concerns about consistency and cost management across properties, Victoria corrected. My goal is to demonstrate that in-house teams with proper support are more effective than outsourced alternatives. But I need concrete operational details to make that case. David's natural caution warred with his desire to protect his team and the standards they had worked hard to establish. If I agree to this, I need transparency about how the information will be used. And my team needs to know what's happening. Keeping them in the dark while their future is being decided isn't right. Victoria considered this for a moment before nodding. I can agree to keep you informed about how your input influences the proposal. As for your team, you can tell them that alternatives are being considered, but no decisions have been made. Further details would need to remain confidential until the board reviews the final proposals. It wasn't everything David wanted, but it was more consideration than most executives would offer employees at his level. I'll need to think about it. Of course, Victoria agreed, returning to her lunch with practiced composure. I wouldn't expect an immediate decision. The board meeting is scheduled for 3 weeks from now, so there's time for careful consideration. The remainder of lunch shifted to less contentious topics, including Emma's upcoming visit to the company labs and technical aspects of building management that clearly interested Victoria more than David had initially realized. Her questions revealed genuine knowledge about systems integration and efficiency modeling that surprised him. Most executives he'd encountered treated maintenance as an unfortunate necessity rather than a strategic component of property management. As lunch concluded, Victoria walked with David to the elevator, their conversation continuing about the technical aspects of predictive maintenance scheduling. In the middle of explaining a particular approach to equipment lifecycle management, Victoria suddenly stopped, a rare expression of uncertainty crossing her features. I have a personal request unrelated to business matters, she said, her tone less commanding than usual. I'd like to join you and Emma for the lab tour on Thursday. Not just a brief appearance, but to actually guide you through the facilities myself. The request struck David as uncharacteristically vulnerable, coming from someone who typically issued directives rather than invitations. Any particular reason? Victoria hesitated, something David hadn't observed before. Your daughter's perspective is refreshing. Children see things adults miss, ask questions we've forgotten to ask. She paused again. And I rarely have the opportunity to share the technical aspects of our work with someone who appreciates them for their own sake, rather than just their profit potential. The honesty of the admission resonated with David more than he had expected. Despite his continued caution about Victoria's corporate agenda, he found himself nodding agreement. Emma would like that. She's been talking about the lab visit nonstop since Saturday night. A genuine smile briefly transformed Victoria's features before her usual composed expression returned. Excellent. I'll arrange my schedule accordingly. As David rode the elevator down from the executive floor, He reflected on the increasingly complicated nature of his interactions with Victoria Hale. What had begun as a chance encounter had evolved into something neither purely professional nor truly personal, with corporate agendas and human connections intertwining in ways he couldn't easily categorize. Returning to Riverside, David found Mike waiting in their office with barely contained tension. "You had lunch with Hale herself?" Mike asked as soon as David closed the door. "What happened? Are the outsourcing rumors true?" David shared what he could without violating the confidentiality Victoria had requested, explaining that multiple options were being considered, but no final decisions had been made. "She wants my input on the maintenance operations model as part of the evaluation process." Mike looked skeptical. "Sounds like they want you to help design the system that replaces us. Classic move. Get the insiders to create the blueprint, then hand it to the lowest bidding contractor." "Maybe," David acknowledged, unable to completely dismiss the possibility despite Victoria's seeming sincerity. "But if there's a chance to influence the decision in a way that preserves our team, I need to consider it." "Just be careful," Mike warned. "Getting close to the executive level when restructuring is happening is dangerous territory. Either you're being groomed for something bigger, or you're being managed until they don't need you anymore." The warning resonated with concerns David had already been considering. Victoria's interest in his operational approach made professional sense, but her desire to connect with Emma on a personal level added a complexity that defied simple corporate maneuvering. People as successful as Victoria Hale didn't achieve their position without strategic calculation, yet there had been moments of apparent genuine connection that couldn't be easily dismissed as manipulation. Thursday afternoon arrived with Emma practically vibrating with excitement about the lab tour. David arranged to leave work early, meeting Emma at her school and taking the subway to SecureTech headquarters. His daughter's eyes widened as they approached the imposing glass tower. "Dad, it's like a giant crystal growing out of the ground," Emma exclaimed, her head tilted back to take in the building's full height. "Does Ms. Hale work at the very top, like a queen in a tower?" David chuckled at the apt, if somewhat fairy tale comparison. "Her office is near the top, yes, but we're visiting the research labs, which I think are a few floors down." The security protocols for visitors were thorough but unobtrusive, with special attention paid to making Emma feel welcome rather than scrutinized. They were issued visitor badges with their photos already printed. Clearly their arrival had been anticipated, and escorted to a mid-level floor where the research and development facilities were located. Rebecca met them at the elevator, greeting Emma with particular warmth. "Ms. Hale is looking forward to showing you the labs herself," she explained, as she led them through security doors into a reception area specifically designed for the R&D department. "She's just finishing a call and will join you momentarily." Emma, momentarily shy in the unfamiliar environment, stayed close to David as they waited. The reception area featured displays showcasing the company's technological achievements, including a timeline of security innovations that traced SecureTech's growth from a small startup to an industry leader. Victoria appeared a few minutes later, dressed more casually than David had seen previously in dark trousers and a simple blue blouse rather than her usual formal business attire. The modification seemed deliberately intended to appear more approachable, particularly to Emma. "Welcome to SecureTech," she greeted them, directing her attention first to Emma with a warmth that seemed genuinely rather than strategically deployed. "Are you ready to see some of the projects our engineers and scientists are working on?" Emma's natural enthusiasm quickly overcame her initial shyness. "Yes, Dad said you have robots and special computers that can see things people can't." Victoria smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usually composed features. "We do indeed. Shall we start with the robotics lab? I think you'll find it particularly interesting." What followed was a comprehensive tour of SecureTech's research facilities, with Victoria herself explaining complex technological concepts in terms that engaged Emma without talking down to her. David observed with interest as Victoria demonstrated a level of technical knowledge and genuine passion for innovation that seemed at odds with the cold corporate persona he had initially encountered. In the robotics lab, Emma was introduced to a prototype security robot designed to patrol sensitive areas, its sensors capable of detecting unauthorized access attempts through multiple methods. The engineer supervising the project, clearly briefed about their visit, allowed Emma to help guide the robot through a simple obstacle course using a tablet interface. The robot uses artificial intelligence to learn about its environment, Victoria explained as Emma directed the machine with increasing confidence. It gets better at navigating and identifying potential security concerns the more it operates, similar to how you learn more about your neighborhood the more you explore it. Emma's questions were direct and insightful in the way only children's questions can be, cutting through technical complexity to fundamental issues. But what if someone tricks it? Dad says the best security systems still need people to make sure they're working right. Victoria nodded approvingly. Your father is exactly right. Technology is a tool, not a replacement for human judgment. That's why all our systems include human oversight and verification protocols. Throughout the tour, David noticed Victoria gradually relaxing, her interactions with Emma becoming more natural and less carefully calibrated. When they visited the Environmental Systems Lab, where SecureTech was developing energy-efficient, climate-control technology, Victoria deferred to David's practical expertise several times, acknowledging the limitations of theoretical models when confronted with real-world implementation challenges. This is why I wanted you both to see our work, Victoria commented, as they observed a demonstration of adaptive lighting systems designed to reduce energy consumption. Emma asked the questions our engineers sometimes forget to consider, and you understand the practical applications in ways our theoretical team doesn't always grasp. The comment seemed genuine rather than calculated flattery, reflecting an authentic recognition of different types of valuable knowledge. David found himself reassessing Victoria yet again, seeing glimpses of someone whose corporate armor concealed a more complex person than he had initially assumed. The tour concluded in a specialized lab where technology and art intersected, a space devoted to visualization systems that translated complex data into comprehensible visual formats. The lead researcher, a woman named Dr. Chen, who happened to be Rebecca's sister, showed Emma how security information could be represented through color patterns and spatial relationships rather than traditional numerical displays. This is where science becomes art, Dr. Chen explained, helping Emma use a simplified version of their modeling software to create a visual representation of building access patterns. We're trying to make complex information understandable through visual intuition rather than just analysis. Emma was completely absorbed in the demonstration, her natural aptitude for both artistic and logical thinking, making her an ideal audience for the project. As she experimented with different visualization approaches, Victoria moved to stand beside David, observing Emma's engagement with evident satisfaction. She has remarkable intuitive understanding, Victoria commented quietly. The ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated elements is rare, especially at her age. David watched his daughter with pride. She's always been able to approach problems from unexpected angles. Her teachers say she connects dots that others don't even see are related. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. That kind of integrative thinking is precisely what we try to nurture here. Too much specialization creates artificial boundaries between disciplines that should inform each other. As Dr. Chen continued working with Emma, Victoria turned to David with unexpected directness. Have you considered what educational opportunities would best develop her obvious talents? Her current school is adequate, but unlikely to fully nurture her particular gifts. The question touched on a sensitive point. David was acutely aware of the educational advantages his limited resources couldn't provide, despite Emma's obvious potential. We make do with what's available. The public STEM program at her school is actually quite good. Victoria seemed about to respond when her phone vibrated with an incoming message. Checking it briefly, her expression tightened into a controlled mask of professional concern. I apologize, but something requires my immediate attention. Rebecca will ensure you see anything else of interest before you leave. The abrupt shift was jarring after the relaxed interaction of the previous hour. Victoria thanked Emma for visiting, promised to arrange another tour when more projects were ready for demonstration, and departed with the efficient purpose of an executive managing a crisis. Rebecca appeared moments later, smoothly taking over the tour and explaining that Victoria had been called to an unexpected board matter. She guided them through a few remaining labs before escorting them back to the main lobby, arranging for a company car to take them home despite David's assurance that the subway would be fine. As they rode home in the unexpected luxury of a chauffeured car, Emma chattered excitedly about everything she had seen, particularly the visualization systems that had so captured her imagination. David listened with one ear, his thoughts preoccupied with Victoria's abrupt departure and what board matter might have required such immediate attention. The answer came later that evening in the form of a business news alert on his phone. Secure Tech accelerates operational restructuring. Outsourcing rumors confirmed. The article, citing anonymous sources within the company, claimed that the board had approved an aggressive timeline for transitioning building maintenance operations to third-party vendors across all properties, with implementation to begin within 30 days. The timing couldn't have been coincidence. The board meeting Victoria had mentioned wasn't supposed to happen for weeks, yet somehow a decision appeared to have been made, or at least leaked, on the very day she had personally hosted them for a lab tour. The contradiction between her apparent sincerity during their discussions and this development left David with a growing sense that he had been managed exactly as Mike had warned. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't what it appears. We need to talk. VH." The message only deepened David's confusion and sense of betrayal. If Victoria had known about the board's plans while showing them around her company with apparent openness, the entire interaction took on a more calculated aspect. Yet something about her genuine engagement with Emma and evident passion for the technology they'd seen made him hesitate to assume the worst. As Emma finally wound down from her excitement and prepared for bed, David found himself at a crossroads of trust. The corporate executive who might be eliminating his team's jobs and the woman who had connected so genuinely with his daughter seemed like two different people occupying the same elegant form. The question was, which version represented Victoria's true self, the calculating CEO or the person who had shown such unexpected warmth toward a maintenance supervisor's child? David's phone buzzed again with another message from the same number. "James has forced the issue with selective information. Don't trust what you're reading. Meet me tomorrow at 7 p.m. Morton's Cafe on Cambridge Street. This isn't over." As he tucked Emma into bed, her sleepy voice caught him by surprise. "Dad, is Miss Hale going to be our friend now?" The innocent question crystallized the complexity of the situation. "I'm not sure, Em. Grown-up relationships are complicated sometimes." Emma yawned, her eyes drifting closed. She looks sad when she thinks nobody's watching, like she needs a friend but doesn't know how to ask. The perceptive observation from his half-asleep daughter lingered with David as he sat at the kitchen table, considering Victoria's text and the contradictory news about the maintenance outsourcing. Emma had always shown an uncanny ability to see past surface behaviors to underlying emotions, a gift she had inherited from her mother. After long consideration, David replied to Victoria's text with a simple confirmation. "I'll be there." In whatever game Victoria Hale was playing, corporate, personal, or some complex combination of both, David needed answers, not just for his own job security, but for his team's future and increasingly for his understanding of a woman whose complexity continued to challenge his assumptions. Tomorrow's meeting would determine whether Victoria was manipulating him as part of some elaborate corporate strategy, or if there were genuine human connections forming that transcended their different worlds and responsibilities. The question that troubled him most as he finally prepared for bed was how he would explain to Emma if Victoria proved to be simply using them for some corporate purpose. His daughter had connected with the woman in a way that suggested she had seen something genuine beneath Victoria's careful exterior. David hoped, for Emma's sake as well as his own increasingly confused feelings, that his daughter's instincts about Victoria Hale's need for authentic connection would prove more accurate than his own wary suspicions. Morton's Cafe occupied a quiet corner in Cambridge, far enough from both Secure Tech's corporate headquarters and the Riverside complex to provide neutral territory. David arrived 5 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy without isolation. The past 24 hours had been a roller coaster of emotions as he tried to reconcile Victoria's apparent sincerity with the business news reporting an accelerated timeline for outsourcing the maintenance operations. When Victoria entered precisely at 7:00 p.m., her appearance caught him by surprise. Gone was the immaculate corporate executive in designer suits. Instead, she wore dark jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail rather than the elaborate styling she typically favored. Without the trappings of wealth and power, she looked almost approachable. Still elegant, but human in a way her CEO persona rarely allowed. The transformation was clearly deliberate, an attempt to change the dynamic between them. As she approached, David noted the tension in her typically composed features and the shadows under her eyes suggesting recent sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," she said, taking the seat across from him. "I imagine you have questions." "The article said the board approved outsourcing all maintenance operations," David responded, deciding directness was the only approach that made sense. "Which contradicts everything you told me about wanting my input before decisions were made." Victoria met his gaze steadily. "The board hasn't approved anything yet. James planted that article, releasing selective information to create the impression of a done deal. It's a power play. Create public expectations that force the board's hand." "That's a serious accusation about your CFO," David observed carefully. Victoria's fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the wooden tabletop. "James and I have fundamentally different visions for secure tech. He wants aggressive cost-cutting to maximize short-term profits before our next funding round. I believe in building sustainable operations that prioritize quality and retain valuable institutional knowledge." A flicker of genuine emotion crossed her features. "This isn't just about maintenance operations. It's about the soul of the company I built." A server approached, momentarily interrupting their conversation. Victoria ordered a simple black coffee while David chose tea, both declining food. The mundane exchange provided a moment for David to gather his thoughts. "Even if what you're saying is true, why involve me? I'm just the maintenance supervisor at one of your properties. Corporate power struggles happen well above my pay grade." For the first time since he'd met her, Victoria seemed to struggle with her words, her customary precision giving way to something more human and uncertain. "Because I need your help to stop it. Because your team at Riverside has created systems and procedures that should be a model for our entire property portfolio. Because," she hesitated, "because you see through the corporate facade to what actually matters. And because Emma would never forgive me if I let this happen." The mention of his daughter shifted something in David's perception. "You've become fond of her." It wasn't a question, but Victoria answered anyway, her expression softening. "Your daughter sees through pretense in a way most adults can't. She treats people as people, not positions or resources." A hint of vulnerability crossed her features. "And yes, I've become fond of her, more than I expected or intended." David studied Victoria with newfound interest, seeing beyond the CEO to the woman underneath. "What exactly is James doing, and how could I possibly help stop it?" Victoria took a sip of her coffee, gathering her thoughts. "James has prepared a detailed outsourcing proposal that appears to save millions annually. Lower fixed costs, reduced benefit obligations, greater operational flexibility. The numbers look impressive on paper, but ignore the real-world complexities of building management. They don't account for the institutional knowledge that prevents catastrophic failures or the preventative work that never shows up in metrics because problems get solved before they happen." "Models always look cleaner than reality," David observed, drawing on years of practical experience. "Exactly," Victoria agreed with unexpected enthusiasm. "That's precisely what I've been arguing to the board. But James has financial projections and consultant reports, while I have," she gestured vaguely, "intuition and principles. In corporate boardrooms, numbers usually win over concepts. So what do you need from me?" "Data, real-world examples that demonstrate why your team's integrated approach creates value that outsourced services can't match. Documentation of how your preventative maintenance program reduces long-term costs. Specific instances where institutional knowledge prevented major problems that standard protocols would have missed." David considered her request, seeing both the professional opportunity and the personal implications. "You're asking me to help make a case for keeping my own job. I'm asking you to help make a case for maintaining quality operations over cost-cutting," Victoria corrected gently. "Though yes, that would include preserving your team's positions." The server returned with their drinks, providing another moment for David to gather his thoughts. As he added a small amount of milk to his tea, he weighed Victoria's request against his instincts and responsibilities. "I need to know something first," he said after the server departed. "The dinner, the gala invitation, Emma's tour of the labs. Was that all strategic relationship building to enlist my help in your corporate power struggle? The question clearly struck home. Victoria set down her coffee cup, her composed exterior momentarily fracturing to reveal something more vulnerable. It didn't start that way. Our dinner was genuinely coincidental. She paused, seeming to search for the right words. Your directness that night was startling. I can't remember the last time someone spoke to me as a person rather than as a position to be managed or a resource to be exploited. She met his eyes. The gala invitation was impulsive. I wanted to see if your authenticity would survive in a different context. And Emma wasn't calculated at all. Something genuine flickered across her features. Your daughter is extraordinary, David. The way she engages with the world without preconceptions or agenda is something I haven't experienced in a very long time. David could see the emotion behind her carefully controlled expression, recognition of a fundamental truth about his daughter that only someone who truly saw Emma could have articulated. All right, Undum, he said finally. I'll help you put together the maintenance operation data, not for Secure Tech's bottom line or for your boardroom battle with James, but because good maintenance programs run by people who care about their buildings that create better, safer environments for everyone. And because Emma would want me to help you. The tension in Victoria's shoulders visibly eased. Thank you. The board meeting is next Thursday. We don't have much time. They spent the next hour outlining the data they would need to compile. Emergency response metrics, preventative maintenance statistics, tenant satisfaction ratings, and specific examples where the maintenance team's institutional knowledge had prevented major systems failures. David described several incidents where Mike Guzman's decades of experience had identified potential problems that no inspection checklist would have caught. We should involve Mike directly, David suggested, as they finalized their plan. He has 30 years of building systems experience and documentation going back to before computerized maintenance records, and he's respected by the entire team. Victoria hesitated, executive caution warring with practical necessity. James has allies throughout the company. Expanding the circle of people who know about this internal conflict is risky. Mike Guzman has been my mentor since I started at Riverside, David countered. He's seen corporations make short-sighted decisions about maintenance operations for decades, but he's never been the type to make things worse with rumors or speculation. He's practical, direct, and cares deeply about the building and his team. Victoria studied him for a long moment, then nodded decisively. If you trust him, that's good enough for me. The statement represented a significant shift from the imperious executive who had first dismissed a restaurant server's humanity. We can meet tomorrow afternoon. I'll arrange for a conference room away from the executive floors. As they prepared to leave, Victoria touched David's arm lightly. Thank you for giving me the benefit of the doubt. I know my position makes it easy to assume the worst about my motivations. The simple acknowledgement of the power imbalance between them surprised David with its self-awareness. Everyone deserves to be judged by their actions, not their job title, he replied, echoing the principle that had guided their first interaction at the restaurant. Outside, the autumn evening had turned chilly, with a light mist softening the streetlights. Victoria's driver waited discreetly in a black car across the street, a reminder of the very different worlds they ordinarily occupied. How is Emma doing after the lab tour? Victoria asked, her interest apparently genuine rather than the strategic conversation management. David smiled, thinking of his daughter's enthusiasm. She hasn't stopped talking about the visualization systems. She's already trying to create her own version using art supplies and coding tools from her school's STEM program. Victoria's expression brightened. Dr. Chen mentioned how impressed she was with Emma's intuitive understanding of the interface. She has a natural ability to connect technical concepts with visual representation. It's a rare combination. Sarah, my wife, was the same way, David said. The memory bittersweet, but treasured. She could look at complex systems and immediately see patterns that others missed. A comfortable silence fell between them as they walked toward the cafe exit, both seemingly aware that their relationship had shifted into something neither had anticipated when they had first encountered each other days earlier. I'll have Rebecca send you the board presentation template tomorrow, Victoria said, professional once more but with a new warmth underlying her efficiency. If you and Mike can compile the maintenance operation data, I'll handle translating it into the financial metrics the board responds to. The next morning, David arrived at Riverside earlier than usual, determined to begin gathering the data they would need. Mike was already in their shared office, reviewing overnight maintenance logs with his customary thoroughness. "You're here early," Mike observed, looking up from his computer. "Everything okay?" David closed the office door, ensuring their conversation would remain private. "I met with Victoria Hale last night. The outsourcing situation is more complicated than we thought, and I need your help." Over the next 30 minutes, David explained the situation, including James Peterson's apparent manipulation of information and Victoria's efforts to preserve their maintenance operations. Mike listened with the careful attention that had made him such an effective mentor, asking occasional clarifying questions but reserving judgment until David had finished. "So the CEO wants our help to fight her own CFO," Mike summarized, leaning back in his chair. "That's not something you see every day in corporate America." "It sounds crazy, I know," David acknowledged. "But I believe she's sincere about wanting to maintain quality operations over cost cutting. She seems to genuinely value the kind of practical expertise our team represents." Mike studied his younger colleague with the wisdom of decades in building maintenance. "And there's nothing personal influencing your judgment here? No billionaire CEO taking a special interest in a hardworking single dad and his precocious daughter?" David felt a flush of embarrassment at Mike's perceptiveness. "It's not like that. We're from completely different worlds." "Uh-huh," Mike responded, unconvinced but not unkind. "Well, regardless of whatever else might be happening, I'm with you on fighting the outsourcing. What do you need from me?" Relieved by Mike's support, David outlined the data they needed to compile. As expected, Mike's institutional knowledge proved invaluable, producing documentation going back 15 years that demonstrated the clear financial and operational advantages of in-house maintenance teams with deep building-specific expertise. That afternoon, they met Victoria in a small conference room, deliberately chosen for its distance from the executive floors. As they worked through the maintenance data, David noticed Victoria gradually relaxing into a more natural version of herself, still brilliant and strategic, but without the carefully maintained corporate facade she typically presented to the world. Her genuine interest in the technical details of building operations revealed someone who understood and valued practical knowledge, not just as a means to financial ends, but as worthwhile expertise in its own right. By late afternoon, they had developed a comprehensive presentation that made both the practical and financial case for maintaining in-house maintenance operations with enhanced training and technology integration. "This is excellent work," Victoria said as they concluded, her satisfaction evident. "With your permission, I'd like to include both of you as resources during the board presentation. Not for the entire meeting, but available to answer specific questions about maintenance operations if needed." Mike looked to David, deferring to his judgment about this unusual situation. "If it helps protect our team, I'm willing," David responded, speaking for both of them. The days leading up to the board meeting passed in a blur of preparation. David and Mike continued gathering compelling examples of their team's value while maintaining their regular maintenance duties. Victoria sent daily updates through Rebecca, refining their presentation with a strategic insight that had built her company from a startup to an industry leader. Throughout this intensive collaboration, David found himself increasingly drawn to the person beneath Victoria's carefully maintained public persona, the woman who could discuss complex technical systems with genuine interest, who remembered details about Emma's schedule and preferences, who seemed to be rediscovering her own values through their unlikely connection. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. David had arranged for Emma to visit Dr. Chen in the visualization lab while they attended the board meeting, her excitement about continuing her project temporarily displacing his concerns about the corporate battle ahead. As they entered SecureTech headquarters, the contrast between David and Mike's practical world and Victoria's corporate domain was striking. The executive waiting area, where they were asked to remain until needed, offered spectacular views of Boston Harbor, its luxurious furnishings designed to impress corporate visitors. David and Mike seemed conspicuously out of place among the executives in designer suits who occasionally passed through, though neither man appeared particularly concerned by the status discrepancy. How do you think it's going in there? Mike asked as they waited, gesturing toward the boardroom where Victoria was presumably already presenting their case. Victoria is brilliant and strategic, David replied. She wouldn't have involved us if she didn't believe we had a real chance of convincing the board. But James has financial models and corporate momentum on his side. Mike nodded, understanding the challenge. Numbers versus people. In boardrooms, numbers usually win. Not always, David replied, thinking of Victoria's determination to protect quality operations over cost-cutting. Sometimes the right person can make numbers tell a different story. At precisely 2:37 p.m., Rebecca appeared in the waiting area. They're ready for you now. The secure tech boardroom embodied corporate power, a massive table of polished mahogany surrounded by ergonomic chairs occupied by men and women whose collective decisions affected thousands of lives and billions of dollars. Victoria stood at the head of the table, her presentation displayed on the room's multiple screens. James Peterson sat nearby, his expression carefully neutral but tension evident in his posture. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Miller, Mr. Guzman. Victoria greeted them with professional courtesy that acknowledged their expertise without overemphasizing their unusual presence in such rarefied surroundings. The board has some questions about maintenance operations that I believed you could address most effectively. For the next 20 minutes, David and Mike responded to increasingly technical questions about building systems, preventative maintenance protocols, and emergency response procedures. The board members, initially skeptical about input from operational staff rather than executives, gradually engaged with the practical knowledge that informed David and Mike's answers. So you're saying that the Anderson Tower HVAC failure resulted directly from outsourced maintenance failing to recognize early warning signs? Asked an older woman who had been introduced as the head of the finance committee. Mike nodded confidently. Yes, ma'am. The third-party vendor followed standard inspection protocols, but missed system-specific issues that any long-term maintenance staff would have recognized immediately. The resulting failure cost $4.7 million in emergency repairs and tenant compensation, plus immeasurable reputation damage. And you believe a similar situation could occur at our properties under an outsourcing model? The woman continued, clearly weighing the financial implications. It's not just possible, it's probable, David responded, his conviction evident. Buildings are complex integrated systems with unique characteristics that develop over time. Standardized maintenance protocols can't account for those specificities without the institutional knowledge that comes from consistent, dedicated staff who understand their buildings as comprehensive environments rather than collections of separate systems. Victoria smoothly redirected the conversation to the financial models she had developed based on David and Mike's data, showing how initial cost savings from outsourcing were typically eliminated or reversed within 18 to 36 months due to increased emergency repairs, tenant dissatisfaction, and shortened equipment lifespan. James finally spoke, his tone professionally skeptical, but with an undercurrent of tension. These projections assume preventative maintenance creates value that offsets its higher immediate costs. But the outsourcing proposals include preventative protocols as well, at significantly lower fixed costs. With respect, sir, Mike responded, before Victoria could, his decades of experience evident in his confident rebuttal. I've seen those standardized preventative protocols. They're checking boxes, not truly maintaining buildings. They don't account for building-specific conditions or interaction effects between systems. James's lips tightened, almost imperceptibly. That's anecdotal evidence rather than data-driven analysis. Actually, Victoria interjected smoothly, the differential response data from our properties that experience management transitions provides precisely that data-driven evidence. She brought up a new slide showing comparative metrics. Properties that maintain consistent in-house teams show 37% fewer catastrophic failures and 22% higher tenant satisfaction ratings than those that transition to outsourced maintenance, even when controlling for building age and condition. A subtle shift rippled through the boardroom as several members leaned forward with increased interest. The finance committee chair in particular seemed to be reassessing the situation, her gaze moving thoughtfully between Victoria's presentation and James's increasingly tense posture. When they were finally dismissed from the boardroom, Rebecca escorted David and Mike to the visualization lab, where Emma was working with Dr. Chen. As they waited for news from the board meeting, David tried to distract himself by watching his daughter's impressive progress with the visualization system. She has remarkable intuition for the interface, Dr. Chen commented quietly. Most adults take days to develop the level of control she's achieved in a few hours. She's creating something quite beautiful. Indeed, Emma's visualization responded to the classical music playing through the lab's speakers with extraordinary sensitivity, the colors and patterns flowing and evolving in ways that somehow captured the emotional essence of the music rather than just its technical structure. Nearly 2 hours passed before Victoria appeared in the lab doorway. Her expression revealed nothing, the controlled corporate mask firmly in place as she thanked Dr. Chen for hosting Emma. Only after they had left the lab and entered a private elevator did her composure soften slightly. The board has agreed to implement an enhanced in-house maintenance program rather than outsourcing, she announced as the elevator began its descent. Your jobs are safe, and the program will actually receive additional resources for training and technology support. The relief that flooded through David was profound, not just for his own position, but for his team members who had worried about their livelihoods. And James? Something complicated flickered across Victoria's features. That's more complex. The board was disturbed by his premature leak to the press, but his financial expertise still holds significant value for the company. She paused, choosing her words carefully. We've reached a compromise. James remains CFO, but oversight of property operations moves entirely under my direct control, and he's been removed from succession planning discussions. Mike whistled softly. Corporate politics. Never clean, never simple. Victoria's lips curved in a wry smile. Precisely. This isn't the complete victory I might have hoped for, but it protects what matters most. The quality standards and the jobs of the maintenance teams. She glanced at David. And it gives us time to implement the enhanced program and prove its value conclusively. Emma, who had been listening with the selective attention of a child more interested in her visualization project than corporate politics, looked up at Victoria with her characteristic directness. Does this mean you won't be Ken when nobody's watching anymore? The question caught Victoria completely off guard, her carefully maintained composure fracturing to reveal genuine emotion. What do you mean, Emma? You look sad sometimes when you think people aren't paying attention, Emma explained with 9-year-old perception. Like you're carrying something heavy that nobody can see. The simple observation cut through layers of corporate complexity to the human core of the situation. Victoria knelt to Emma's level, something David had never seen her do before. You're very perceptive, Emma, she said softly. Yes, I think I will be less sad now. Thank you for noticing. The moment of vulnerability transformed something in David's perception of Victoria Hale. Beneath the billionaire CEO, beneath the strategic corporate leader, was simply a person struggling with her own battles and finding unexpected connection with a maintenance supervisor and his remarkably perceptive daughter. The elevator reached the lobby where Victoria's driver waited to take them back to their respective worlds, Victoria to her executive responsibilities, David and Mike to Riverside, and Emma to their modest apartment with its glow-in-the-dark stars and container garden on the balcony. Will we see you again? Emma asked Victoria as they prepared to part ways, the question carrying a child's straightforward hope unencumbered by adult complexities. Victoria glanced at David, something unspoken passing between them, before she answered Emma with unusual gentleness. I hope so. Perhaps you could show me your container garden sometime. I've never had much success with growing things. Emma's face brightened. Dad and I are planting fall vegetables this weekend. You could help if you want. It's messy, but fun. The invitation, delivered with a child's innocent disregard for social boundaries and corporate hierarchies, created a moment of possibility that hung in the air between them. Victoria looked to David, clearly unwilling to presume. Sunday afternoon would work for us, David said, making the decision to bridge their separate worlds in a way that felt both surprising and somehow inevitable. Nothing fancy, just soil, seeds, and Emma's very specific ideas about proper plant spacing. Victoria's smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed her features. I'd like that very much. Thank you. As their car pulled away from SecureTech's gleaming tower, Mike gave David a knowing look. So, the billionaire CEO is coming to play in the dirt with you and Emma. That's not something you see every day. David watched the city pass by, considering the unlikely turn his life had taken since that first confrontation in the restaurant. She's not just the CEO. There's a person underneath all that corporate armor who's been hiding for a very long time. Mike nodded thoughtfully. I've been around long enough to know that money and power don't make people happy. Connection does. And that little girl of yours has a gift for connecting with people that most adults have forgotten how to do. Just like her mother, David said softly, the memory of Sarah a bittersweet presence in his thoughts. Sunday afternoon arrived with perfect fall weather, crisp, clear, and ideal for garden planting. David and Emma had spent the morning preparing their balcony container garden, emptying the summer plants that had finished producing and refreshing the soil for fall vegetables. Emma had meticulously planned the arrangement, carefully measuring spacing for kale, spinach, and the dwarf peas that would climb the balcony railing. Victoria arrived precisely on time, her transformation from corporate executive to weekend visitor striking. Dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, with her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, she looked almost ordinary, still elegant but approachably human in a way her business persona rarely allowed. Emma greeted her with characteristic enthusiasm, immediately pulling her toward the balcony to explain the garden plan in elaborate detail. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed her complete inexperience with growing things but sincere curiosity about the process. I've never actually planted anything, she admitted, as Emma demonstrated how to create the proper depth for her spinach seeds. My apartment has a terrace, but the building service maintains it. I rarely even go out there. That's sad, Emma declared with 9-year-old directness. Growing things is the best feeling. Look, you try planting these seeds. What followed was a remarkable afternoon of simple shared activity, planting seeds, arranging containers for proper sunlight, discussing the care requirements for different vegetables. Victoria approached the task with the same focused attention she might give to a corporate acquisition, following Emma's instructions with careful precision while gradually relaxing into the simple pleasure of working with soil and plants. David prepared a straightforward dinner. Nothing fancy, just homemade lasagna and salad, which they ate at the small kitchen table with Emma dominating the conversation. Victoria seemed content to be guided by the 9-year-old's enthusiasm, her corporate authority completely set aside in favor of genuine engagement with Emma's world. After dinner, while Emma organized her school materials for the coming week, David and Victoria stood on the balcony in comfortable silence, looking out at the modest view of neighboring buildings and distant city lights. Thank you for today, Victoria said quietly, for letting me be part of something real. David studied her profile, seeing the woman rather than the CEO. Is that what's been missing, reality? Victoria considered the question with the thoughtfulness that characterized her approach to everything. When you achieve a certain level of success, people start managing your reality. They filter information, anticipate your needs, remove obstacles before you even encounter them. It creates efficiency but eliminates, she gestured toward the simple container garden. Life. No one brings dirt and seeds into my carefully curated world. The insight explained much about Victoria's response to David's directness and Emma's natural authenticity. In a life surrounded by strategic calculation and careful management, genuine human connection had become the rarest commodity. Over the following weeks, an unexpected pattern developed. Victoria began appearing regularly in their lives, joining them for simple weeknight dinners, helping Emma with her science projects, even attending a particularly painful elementary school band concert where Emma proudly demonstrated her ability to play hot cross buns on the recorder without most of the squeaky parts. At Riverside, the maintenance team noticed changes too. The enhanced program Victoria had championed brought additional resources and recognition for their work. Mike took on a formal mentoring role for newer team members, his decades of experience finally acknowledged as the valuable asset it had always been. The corporate battle with James continued in more subtle forms. Though he remained CFO, his influence had been curtailed, and Victoria's vision of sustainable operations over short-term profits gradually gained traction throughout the company. The business press reported a strategic realignment at SecureTech that emphasize quality standards and institutional knowledge as competitive advantages rather than cost centers. For David, the most striking change was watching the gradual emergence of the woman beneath Victoria's corporate persona. With each visit to their modest apartment, each conversation over simple meals, each interaction with Emma's straightforward perspective, Victoria seemed to rediscover aspects of herself that had been buried beneath years of strategic calculation and protective distance. One evening in late November, as the first snow of the season dusted Boston with white, Victoria joined them for dinner. Emma had spread her school science project materials across the living room floor before eventually falling asleep on the couch, exhausted by her own enthusiasm. As David tucked a blanket around his sleeping daughter, he caught Victoria watching them with a wistful expression. "She's extraordinary," she said quietly when David joined her at the kitchen table with cups of tea. "The way she sees connections between things, how she approaches the world with such open curiosity." "Sarah was the same way," David replied, the memory now carrying warmth alongside the inevitable sadness. "She could find patterns where other people just saw chaos." Victoria studied him thoughtfully, seeming to gather courage for something significant. "David, there's something I need to ask you, and I want complete honesty." The unusual directness caught his attention. "All right. These past weeks with you and Emma have meant more to me than I can adequately express." She paused, uncharacteristically uncertain. "But I need to know, is this relationship developing because you genuinely want it to, or because I'm still ultimately your employer and you feel some obligation?" The question revealed vulnerability that the corporate Victoria Hale would never have acknowledged. David considered his response carefully, knowing the importance of absolute honesty in this moment. "When we first met, I stood up to you because I believed everyone deserves basic respect, regardless of their social position." He met her gaze directly. "That hasn't changed. I've never made decisions about personal relationships based on professional advantage, and I'm not starting now. Emma and I have welcomed you into our lives because we value who you are, not what you own or what position you hold." The tension in Victoria's expression eased visibly. "Thank you for that. My position makes it difficult to trust people's motivations. It's been a very long time since I have experienced relationships that weren't in some way transactional." "Well, Emma's affection is completely non-transactional," David smiled, glancing toward his sleeping daughter, "unless you count her expectation that you admire every new sprout in the container garden." Victoria's laughter held genuine joy, the sound still surprising in its contrast to her former corporate reserve. "A responsibility I take very seriously." Their conversation continued into the evening, moving beyond the careful boundaries they had previously maintained to more personal territory. Victoria's isolated childhood in a family that valued achievement over emotional connection, David's journey through grief while trying to provide stability for Emma, the unexpected parallel paths that had brought them to that first confrontation in the restaurant. When Victoria finally prepared to leave, something had shifted between them. A new honesty that acknowledged the genuine connection that had developed despite their different circumstances and backgrounds. At the door, Victoria hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic directness. "David, would you consider having dinner with me Saturday? Just the two of us." The invitation hung between them, its significance unmistakable. David studied her face, no longer seeing the imperious CEO who had dismissed a restaurant server, but the woman who had planted seeds with Emma and listened to an elementary school band concert with genuine interest. "I'd like that very much." As winter settled over Boston, the relationship between David and Victoria continued to develop with careful, deliberate steps. Their worlds remained separate in many ways. She still commanded a corporate empire from a glass tower downtown, while he maintained the systems that kept buildings functioning properly. But they had found unexpected common ground in their shared values, mutual respect, and genuine appreciation for each other's unique perspectives. The corporate situation evolved as well. James Peterson eventually left SecureTech for a position at a competitor, unable to reconcile himself to Victoria's changing vision for the company. The maintenance enhancement program proved so successful at Riverside that it was gradually implemented across all SecureTech properties, validating David and Mike's practical approach with measurable results that even the most numbers-focused board members couldn't dismiss. Emma, watching the relationship unfold with 9-year-old perception, observed to Mrs. Patel one afternoon while David and Victoria were discussing the container garden's winter protection. They both look happy when they think nobody's watching now. The simple observation captured an essential truth. Beyond corporate hierarchies and social boundaries, beyond professional roles and economic disparities, two people had discovered something genuine in each other. A connection built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of authentic understanding that transcended their different worlds. The vegetables in the container garden thrived despite the winter chill, nurtured by Emma's enthusiasm, David's practical knowledge, and Victoria's newfound appreciation for growing things with her own hands, a fitting metaphor for the relationship developing between them, unexpected but flourishing against all conventional expectations. As Christmas approached, Victoria faced a traditional obligation, hosting SecureTech's annual holiday gala for executives and major clients. After considerable thought, she made an unprecedented decision, extending an invitation to David and Emma. "You don't have to come," she assured them, clearly aware of the potential awkwardness. "It's typically a rather formal corporate affair, but I'd like you to be there, if you want to be." Emma, of course, was immediately enchanted by the idea of another fancy party, while David approached the invitation with more cautious consideration. Attending as Victoria's personal guest would make a statement to her corporate world that couldn't be easily undone. The evening of the gala, David stood before the mirror adjusting his bow tie, the same rented tuxedo he had worn months earlier to the charity event where this unlikely journey had truly begun. Emma twirled in her special occasion dress, the blue fabric with silver accents catching the light. "Do you think Ms. Victoria will be different tonight?" Emma asked with characteristic perceptiveness. "Since it's her work party?" David considered the question thoughtfully. "She might have to be more formal with other people that rare, but I think she'll still be herself with us." And when they arrived at the elegantly decorated ballroom of Boston's finest hotel, the contrast between the David who had first attended such an event and the man who now entered with quiet confidence was striking. He still didn't belong to this world of wealth and privilege, but he no longer felt intimidated by it either. Victoria greeted them with professional warmth that nevertheless carried a special light when she met David's eyes. Throughout the evening, she balanced her responsibilities as host with genuine attention to Emma's excitement and David's comfort. When they found a quiet moment alone, she leaned close to speak privately. "Thank you for coming tonight. Having you both here makes all of this," she gestured to the corporate pageantry around them, "feel more authentic somehow." As midnight approached, Emma finally succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep in a quiet corner the staff had arranged with comfortable seating. David sat beside his daughter, watching Victoria across the room as she gracefully concluded her corporate obligations. When she finally joined him, sinking into the adjacent chair with visible relief at shedding her public role, David smiled with simple appreciation. "You've built something impressive here," he observed, gesturing to the successful company evident in the gathering. Victoria's gaze moved from the glittering corporate celebration to David and Emma, her expression softening. "Yes, but I'm beginning to understand what truly matters." Their relationship continued to develop through the winter months, navigating the complexities of their different worlds with careful attention and mutual respect. Victoria learned to appreciate the simple rhythms of David and Emma's life: weeknight dinners at their small kitchen table, weekend trips to the Science Museum, impromptu movie nights with homemade popcorn. David gained insight into Victoria's corporate responsibilities and the genuine passion for innovation that had built her company. By spring, when the first seedlings emerged in their container garden, now expanded with additional planters Victoria had helped install, the relationship between them had developed into something neither could have anticipated that first night in the restaurant. Still different in many ways, but discovering unexpected harmony in their shared values and genuine connection. Emma, watching new green shoots emerge from the soil they had planted together, offered her simple 9-year-old wisdom. "See, sometimes the best things grow in places you don't expect." David and Victoria exchanged a smile over Emma's head, acknowledging the truth in her observation. Their unlikely connection, the maintenance supervisor and the billionaire CEO, brought together by a chance encounter and a child's perceptive heart, had indeed grown into something neither had expected, but both had come to treasure. The garden flourished in the spring sunshine, nurtured by their combined care, Emma's enthusiasm, David's practical knowledge, and Victoria's newfound appreciation for creating rather than simply acquiring. A fitting metaphor for the relationship that continued to develop between them, bridging different worlds through mutual respect, shared values, and the authentic human connection that ultimately matters more than any corporate title or social boundary.